Before we begin, if stories about healing, second chances, and unexpected love touch your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every like and share helps these stories reach someone who may need them today. The first time Callum Voss looked at me, I felt like he already knew the secret I had spent 3 years trying to hide. The July sun hung low over Rockhaven Harbor, turning the water gold and setting the fishing boats ablaze with reflected light. Tourists crowded the boardwalk for the annual summer festival, children chased one another between food trucks, and a local band played old country songs from a temporary stage near the docks. To everyone else, it probably looked like the perfect small-town afternoon. To me, it was just another day of pretending everything was fine. I stood behind the flower stand my mother had once owned, trimming white carnations with the same worn pair of silver shears she used before she passed away. The handles were scratched. The blades were dull. I should have replaced them years ago, but they were one of the few things that still felt like home. A warm breeze rolled in from the ocean. Everyone around me wore short sleeves, tank tops, sundresses. Meanwhile, I kept my light blue cardigan buttoned all the way to my wrists despite the 88-degree heat. People noticed sometimes. They always asked if I was cold. I always smiled and said yes. Smiling was easier than explaining. Smiling was easier than telling the truth. "You look exhausted," my younger brother Owen said as he stacked flower buckets beside me. At 16, he was already taller than me, all awkward limbs and stubborn determination. "I'm fine, Elid." He gave me the look that meant he knew I was lying but didn't know how to challenge it anymore. That hurt worse than I wanted to admit. Because Owen deserved stability. He deserved a normal life. Instead, he had me, a 27-year-old woman trying to keep a struggling flower shop alive, while holding together a life that felt increasingly fragile. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and reached for another bundle of carnations. That was when the crowd changed. It happened so subtly. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Space opened in the middle of the boardwalk like an invisible tide pulling everyone backward. A black sedan had stopped near the harbor entrance. The driver's door opened. Then another. Men stepped out first. Calm. Professional. The kind of men who noticed everything. My stomach tightened before I even saw him. Callum Voss emerged last. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed simply in a dark gray button-down despite the heat. No flashy jewelry. No expensive watch displayed for attention. He didn't need any of that. People recognized power long before they recognized wealth. Stories followed him everywhere. Business owner. Shipping magnate. Harbor investor. Depending on who was talking, there were other titles too. None of them were spoken very loudly. I lowered my eyes and focused on the flowers. Maybe he would walk past. Maybe I would just become another face in the crowd. Then I felt it. That strange sensation of being watched. I looked up before I could stop myself. Across the busy boardwalk, Callum Voss was staring directly at me. Not at the flowers. Not at the stand. At me. His expression never changed. Neither did mine. But for reasons I couldn't explain, my heart skipped once. Then twice. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that my carefully built world was about to change forever. Most people looked away when Callum Voss entered a room. Not because he demanded it, but because something about him made you aware of every word coming out of your mouth. I told myself that was the reason my hand suddenly felt unsteady as I reached for another bundle of flowers. It had nothing to do with the fact that he was still looking at me. At least that was what I wanted to believe. The sound of laughter drifted across the harbor. Children ran past carrying paper flags. Somewhere near the Ferris wheel, someone dropped a tray and the crowd responded with a wave of amused applause. Life continued as normal around me. Yet the air felt different. He finally looked away first. Relief should have followed. Instead, I felt strangely disappointed. The feeling irritated me enough that I immediately buried it. Men like Callum Voss did not belong in my world. They belonged in newspaper articles, business magazines, and conversations whispered across restaurant tables. I belonged behind a flower stand trying to figure out how to pay next month's supplier invoice. "You are staring," Owen said. "I am not. You literally are." I looked down at the carnations. "Mind your business." He grinned. That is usually how people answer when they are definitely staring. Before I could respond, an elderly customer approached carrying a basket of handmade candles. Mrs. Langley had been buying flowers from our family for almost 20 years. She selected 3 white carnations and smiled warmly. "Your mother always said these were flowers for second chances." My throat tightened. She did. Mrs. Langley squeezed my hand before walking away. The familiar ache settled quietly in my chest. Some days losing Mom still felt recent. Other days it felt impossible to remember the sound of her voice. I missed her most when I was tired. And lately I was always tired. The festival crowd grew larger as the afternoon passed. Business should have made me happy. Instead, I kept checking the street without understanding why. Around 5 o'clock, dark clouds began gathering over the water. The sunlight faded behind them. A cool wind replaced the summer heat. I was packing away empty buckets when a black SUV pulled to the curb across from the stand. My stomach sank immediately. Not because I recognized the vehicle. Because I recognized the men stepping out of it. The same men who had arrived with Callum earlier. They were not rushing. They were not threatening. They simply moved with the confidence of people accustomed to being obeyed. One of them crossed the street and stopped in front of me. "Miss Whitlock?" he asked politely. Every instinct inside me whispered that nothing good followed questions like that. "Yes." He nodded once. "Mr. Voss would like to speak with you." Owen immediately stepped closer beside me. Protective. Suspicious. 16 years old and trying very hard to look intimidating. The man noticed and offered a reassuring smile. "You are not in any trouble." Trouble. The word echoed inside my head anyway. Because people like Callum Voss did not send someone to find a florist for no reason. And as thunder rolled softly over the harbor, I realized my ordinary life might have just taken a turn I could not undo. My first instinct was to say no. Whatever business Callum Voss had with me, I wanted no part of it. The problem was that refusing felt strangely difficult when 3 calm men were standing in front of my flower stand waiting for an answer. They were not threatening. They were not impatient. Somehow that made them even harder to read. I glanced at Owen. He folded his arms across his chest and stared at them like a guard dog who had not yet grown into his paws. "I can handle this," I told him quietly. "That is exactly what people say before things go badly," he muttered. Under different circumstances I might have laughed. Instead I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. The man waiting for my answer checked his watch. "Mr. Voss only wants a conversation." Only a conversation. Simple words. Yet they carried the weight of something larger. I looked around the festival. Families still wandered between food stands. Children still chased each other near the Ferris wheel. The ordinary world continued spinning while mine suddenly felt unsteady. "How long?" I asked. "Not long." I hated vague answers. Unfortunately, they were all I had. "Fine." Owen immediately shook his head. "Marin, I will be back soon." "You do not know that." His voice dropped. What if this is a mistake? I wished I had a better answer. Instead, I squeezed his shoulder. "Lock up the stand if it starts raining." He looked unconvinced but finally nodded. The harbor wind had grown colder by the time I crossed the street. Dark clouds stretched across the horizon, swallowing the last pieces of sunlight. One of the men opened the rear door of the SUV. The interior smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Expensive, quiet, controlled. Everything about it felt far removed from my life above a struggling flower shop. As we pulled away from the festival, I watched Rockhaven pass through the window. The bait shop on Harbor Street. The old diner with the flickering sign. The pharmacy where I bought Owen's allergy medication every spring. Places I knew. Places that felt safe. 20 minutes later we stopped near the shipping district. Massive cargo cranes stood against the darkening sky like steel giants. Warehouses lined the waterfront. The ocean beyond them looked almost black beneath the storm clouds. One of the men led me toward a restored brick building overlooking the harbor. It looked less like an office and more like a place built for privacy. Inside, everything was surprisingly simple. Hardwood floors. Large windows. Shelves filled with books instead of trophies. The receptionist greeted me by name before I had introduced myself. That did not make me feel better. "This way," she said. My heartbeat quickened with every step. At the end of a hallway stood a partially open door. Through it I could see the harbor and the approaching storm. I could also see Callum Voss standing beside the window. His back was turned when I entered. One hand rested in his pocket. The other held what looked like an old silver pocket watch. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he closed the watch gently and turned toward me. Those gray-green eyes settled on mine with unsettling focus. Not cold. Not warm. Just attentive. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Thank you for coming, Miss Whitlock," he said. His voice was calm enough to lower my guard for exactly 1 second. Then his gaze dropped briefly to my cardigan sleeves. And something in his expression changed. My pulse stumbled for reasons I could not explain. It was only a glance. A brief shift of his attention toward my sleeves. Most people would not have noticed it. I did. People learn to notice small things when they spend years avoiding certain conversations. I folded my arms instinctively. The movement was subtle. His eyes returned to my face. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "What?" A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. Most people are less nervous when they have something to hold. I hated that he had noticed I was nervous. "I am not nervous." "Of course." The smile vanished as quickly as it appeared. Somehow that made him seem more dangerous than before. He gestured toward a chair near the window. "Please sit." I considered refusing. Then I remembered I was standing in a private office overlooking half the harbor, while one of the most influential men in Rockhaven waited patiently for me to make a decision. Refusing suddenly felt childish. "Iset." Rain tapped softly against the glass. The storm had finally arrived. Gray clouds swallowed the last traces of daylight, leaving the harbor below washed in silver and shadow. Callum remained standing for a moment before taking the chair across from me. Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Then he reached into a drawer and placed something on the desk between us. A photograph. I frowned. It showed the flower stand. Not today's festival. An older photograph. Years older. My mother stood behind a display of carnations, smiling directly at the camera. My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" His expression softened slightly. "Your mother donated flowers to a children's fundraiser 12 years ago." I stared at the picture. I had never seen it before. "You knew her?" "Not well." He paused. "But I remembered her." The answer surprised me more than it should have. People did not usually remember women like my mother. She had spent her life helping others without asking for recognition. Seeing proof that someone still remembered her years later stirred something unexpectedly emotional inside me. I looked away before it showed. "Why am I here?" I finally asked. Callum studied me for several seconds. "You work 7 days a week." I blinked. "Excuse me. Your flower shop opens before 8 every morning." My stomach tightened. "You have not taken a vacation in over 3 years. Your business expenses have increased. Your revenue has decreased. And you are raising your younger brother alone." Every word landed harder than the last. "Did you investigate me?" I asked questions. "Why?" His gaze drifted briefly toward the storm outside. When he answered, his voice seemed quieter. "Because sometimes people spend so much energy surviving that nobody notices when they start drowning." The room suddenly felt too warm, too small. I stood immediately. "I think this conversation is over." His eyes lifted to mine. Calm, steady, unreadable. "Miss Whitlock." I reached for my cardigan as I turned away. My sleeve caught against the arm of the chair. Fabric shifted. Only an inch. Maybe less. But it was enough. Enough for his eyes to find the faint discoloration near my wrist before I could pull the sleeve back down. The silence that followed felt different from every silence before it. Heavy. Sharp. Unavoidable. And for the first time since entering the office, Callum Voss looked genuinely unsettled. For a second neither of us moved. The rain continued tapping against the glass behind him, soft and steady, while the harbor disappeared beneath a curtain of gray. My hand immediately pulled the sleeve back into place. Too late. I knew it. The look in his eyes told me I knew it. "It is nothing," I said. The words came out too quickly. Too rehearsed. I had used them so many times they barely sounded real anymore. Callum did not answer. He simply watched me. Not the way people usually did when they suspected something was wrong. Most people looked uncomfortable, embarrassed, relieved when you changed the subject. Callum looked like a man staring at a puzzle piece that suddenly fit where it was never supposed to. Miss Whitlock. His voice was calm, careful. What happened to your wrist? I laughed softly. The sound felt hollow even to me. I run a flower shop. Things happen. He said nothing. Boxes fall. Shelves shift. Buckets are heavy. Still nothing. The silence forced me to keep talking. I am clumsy sometimes. His gaze never left mine. No, he said quietly. Just one word. Somehow it landed harder than an accusation. My stomach tightened. You do not know me. You are right. He leaned back slightly. But I know the difference between an accident and something someone is trying very hard to hide. The room suddenly felt difficult to breathe in. I turned toward the window. Cargo ships sat motionless beyond the harbor. Their lights shimmered against the dark water. Anything was easier to look at than him. I should go. You can. The answer surprised me. I looked back. He had not moved. Then why am I still here? A faint shadow crossed his expression. Not anger. Not frustration. Something older. Sadder. Because nobody asked if you were okay. The words hit harder than they should have. My throat tightened instantly. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Not because of him. Because of me. Because I had spent years building walls strong enough to survive behind. One simple question should not have been able to crack them. I am fine. No. Again that quiet certainty. Again that refusal to accept the lie. My eyes burned unexpectedly. I hated that. More than anything, I hated feeling vulnerable in front of a stranger. You do not get to decide how I am doing. For the first time his expression softened. You are right. His gaze drifted briefly toward the old silver pocket watch resting beside him. But I know what it looks like when someone carries too much for too long. Something in his voice made me pause. It was not pity. I could have rejected pity. This sounded more like recognition. Like he was speaking from experience. Thunder rolled across the harbor. Deep. Distant. Callum looked toward the storm for several seconds before reaching for the watch. His thumb brushed the worn silver surface. My sister used to say she was fine too. The room went completely still. The sentence hung between us. Unfinished. Heavy with meaning. He never elaborated. He did not need to. For the first time since arriving, I realized this conversation had never been about curiosity. It had never been about my flower shop. And as I watched the pain flicker briefly behind his calm expression, I understood something even more unsettling. Callum Voss had seen those marks before. Just not on me. The storm intensified while neither of us spoke. Rain streaked across the massive windows, turning the harbor lights into blurred ribbons of gold and white. I should have left. Every instinct told me to walk out of that office and return to the familiar problems waiting for me at home. Instead, I remained standing there, staring at the silver watch resting in Callum's hand. Your sister? I asked before I could stop myself. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For a moment I thought he would ignore the question. Then he looked down at the watch. Her name was Nora. The way he said it felt careful, like speaking her name still required effort. She was younger than me. His thumb brushed the worn edge of the watch. She smiled a lot, worked too hard, took care of everyone around her. Something painful flickered behind his eyes. And every time someone asked if she was okay, she said yes. The room felt smaller with every word. I did not know Nora. I did not know anything about Callum beyond rumors and headlines. Yet suddenly he felt less like an untouchable figure, and more like a man carrying something heavy. What happened? I asked quietly. Silence settled between us. The rain filled it. The distant horn of a cargo ship filled it. Finally he exhaled. I realized too late that she was asking for help without using words. My throat tightened. He never gave details. He did not need to. The sadness in his voice told me enough. Callum looked toward the harbor again before carefully placing the watch back into his pocket. That was a long time ago. I had a feeling it was not long ago to him at all. Some losses never became old. They simply learned how to live beside you. I am sorry, I said. He nodded once. Thank you. Another silence followed. This one felt different. Less hostile. Less guarded. That realization made me uncomfortable. I had spent years keeping people at a distance. Distance was safe. Distance prevented disappointment. Yet somehow this stranger had stepped closer to the truth in 1 hour than most people had in 3 years. I crossed my arms again. You do not need to worry about me. His eyes met mine immediately. That sounds exactly like something a person says when they need someone to worry. I looked away first. Outside, lightning flashed across the horizon. A second later, thunder rolled through the harbor. The storm was directly overhead now. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The sudden sound startled me. Owen. Relief washed through me instantly. I answered. Hey. You have been gone almost 2 hours. His voice carried familiar concern. The shop is closed. The storm is getting worse. I glanced toward the window. He was right. Water poured from the sky in sheets. I am leaving now. Good. He hesitated. Everything okay? The question hit differently after the conversation I had just had. For a second I could not answer. Then years of habit took over. I am fine. Callum heard it. I knew he did. The look that crossed his face confirmed it. Not frustration. Not disbelief. Recognition. The call ended a minute later. I slipped the phone into my pocket and moved toward the door. Thank you for the photograph. He stood as well. You are welcome. My hand touched the doorknob. And thank you for the concern. The words felt awkward leaving my mouth. But I can handle my own life. Something unreadable passed through his expression. I hope that is true, Marin. It was the first time he had used my first name. Somehow that felt more dangerous than anything else he had said all evening. The drive home should have cleared my head. Instead, every mile seemed to make things worse. Rain hammered against the windshield while the wipers struggled to keep up. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold across the wet pavement. And no matter how hard I tried, I could not stop hearing his voice. I hope that is true, Marin. The problem was that I was no longer sure it was. By the time I reached the apartment above the flower shop, the storm had settled over Rockhaven completely. The old building creaked under the wind the way it always did during heavy weather. I climbed the narrow staircase and unlocked the door. The smell of tomato soup greeted me immediately. Owen was in the kitchen wearing one of my oversized sweatshirts and pretending to read a history textbook while scrolling on his phone. You are late, he said without looking up. You sound like a disappointed parent. Someone has to. Despite everything, I smiled. Owen glanced up and immediately frowned. What happened? I set my keys on the counter. Nothing happened. That is your second favorite lie. I blinked. Second favorite? Your favorite is always saying you are fine. I stared at him. For a moment I saw exactly what Callum had seen. The automatic answers. The practiced smiles. The endless deflections. It was unsettling when strangers noticed. It was worse when family did. Owen lowered his phone. Seriously, are you okay? The question lingered between us. I wanted to answer honestly. I really did. But honesty felt dangerous. Honesty opened doors that I had spent years keeping locked. So I forced a smile and reached for a bowl. I am tired. He did not look convinced. Thankfully, he let it go. For now. Later that night, long after Owen had gone to bed, I sat alone by the apartment window. The storm continued outside. Rain slid down the glass in uneven trails. Across the street, the flower shop sat dark and quiet beneath the glow of a single street lamp. I should have been reviewing invoices. I should have been planning next week's orders. Instead, I found myself staring at the old photograph Callum had given me. My mother's smile seemed almost alive beneath the yellow kitchen light. She looked happy, certain, strong, everything I wished I felt. I traced the edge of the photograph with my thumb. What would you do? I whispered. The room offered no answer. Around midnight my phone vibrated unexpectedly. Unknown number. My stomach tightened. For several seconds I simply stared at the screen. Finally I opened the message. There were only 6 words. Make sure you lock your doors tonight. No name. No explanation. Nothing else. A chill moved through me. I immediately checked the number. No contact information. No clue who had sent it. Rationally, it could have been anyone. A wrong number. A prank. Yet something deep inside me already knew. I looked toward the rain-covered window. Toward the dark streets beyond it. Toward the harbor hidden somewhere behind the storm. Then my phone vibrated a second time. Another message appeared beneath the first. This one was even shorter. You forgot your umbrella. Attached below was a photograph. My umbrella. Sitting inside Callum Voss's office. I stared at the photograph for a long time after the screen went dark. The umbrella rested against the corner of Callum's office exactly where I had left it. Somehow that detail unsettled me more than the message itself. Most people would have forgotten an umbrella. Most people would not have noticed. Callum had noticed. I locked the apartment door twice before finally going to bed. Sleep did not come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's smile in the old photograph. Then I saw Callum's expression when he mentioned his sister. Then I saw that message. Make sure you lock your doors tonight. By morning the storm had passed. Sunlight spilled across the harbor, washing Rockhaven in bright gold and blue as if the night before had never happened. I opened the flower shop at 7:30 sharp. Routine usually helped. Water the flowers. Sweep the floor. Check deliveries. Count inventory. Normal tasks. Normal problems. The kind I understood. Unfortunately, normal lasted less than an hour. A delivery truck stopped outside the shop. I frowned immediately. We were not expecting a shipment until Thursday. The driver stepped inside carrying a large white box. Delivery for Marin Whitlock. My stomach tightened. Who sent it? He checked his clipboard. No sender listed. Wonderful. Just what I needed. Another mystery. I signed anyway. Curiosity has always been one of my worst qualities. The box sat on the counter while I debated opening it. Finally, I grabbed a pair of scissors and cut through the tape. Inside were white carnations. Dozens of them. Fresh. Perfect. Arranged with incredible care. My breath caught. White carnations had been my mother's favorite flower. She used to call them flowers of resilience because they kept blooming even after difficult weather. Tucked beneath the arrangement was a small card. No signature. Only a single sentence. Your mother had good taste. I immediately knew who had sent them. Owen walked in from the storage room carrying a bucket. Okay, he said. Now this is getting weird. I could not argue with that. The entire morning passed with customers stopping to admire the flowers. Several offered to buy them. I refused every time. Something about them felt personal. Around noon my phone vibrated. Unknown number again. I should have ignored it. Instead I opened the message immediately. Did the flowers arrive safely? I stared at the screen. Then I typed a response before I could talk myself out of it. Yes. A reply. Appeared almost instantly. Good. For reasons I did not fully understand, that single word made me smile. The realization annoyed me. I erased the smile immediately. A second message appeared. How is your wrist today? The warmth vanished from my chest. There it was again. The concern. The attention. The questions I did not want anyone asking. I looked down at my sleeve. Then toward the busy street outside. Then back at the phone. For several seconds I considered lying. Eventually I typed the truth. It is fine. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally one message arrived. No, Marin. It is not. For a long moment I simply stared at the message. No, Marin. It is not. For words. That was all. Yet somehow they unsettled me more than everything that had happened over the last 2 days. Because they felt true. And because I was tired of pretending otherwise. I locked my phone and shoved it into my apron pocket. The bell above the flower shop door chimed. A customer entered. Then another. The afternoon rush arrived and thankfully, forced me to focus on something else. Flowers were easier than feelings. Flowers followed rules. Water them. Care for them. Give them enough light and they bloomed. People were never that simple. By 4 o'clock my feet ached and my smile felt stretched thin. Owen was restocking vases when a familiar black SUV rolled slowly past the front window. My stomach tightened immediately. It did not stop. Kept going. Yet I noticed something strange. 10 minutes later, another vehicle passed. Different color. Different model. Same slow speed. Same careful attention. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was becoming paranoid. Still, the feeling stayed with me. That evening we closed early. The storm had damaged several vendor tents during the festival, and most businesses were shutting down to clean up. Owen carried empty buckets into storage while I balanced receipts at the register. Numbers usually calmed me. Tonight they only made me more anxious. Expenses were climbing again. Supplier costs, utility bills, insurance payments. Every month felt like a new puzzle with fewer pieces. When I finally looked up, Owen was watching me. You are doing it again. Doing what? Trying to solve every problem in the universe by staring at paperwork. I laughed despite myself. It has not worked yet. Exactly. He leaned against the counter. You know you do not have to carry everything alone. The words hit harder than he intended. Everyone seemed determined to tell me the same thing lately. I changed the subject immediately. Did you finish your history project? He groaned dramatically. Nice attempt. We walked home together after sunset. The streets glowed beneath warm streetlights. The harbor breeze carried the smell of salt water and fresh rain. Rockhaven felt peaceful. Ordinary. Safe. Yet when we reached our building, something unexpected waited on the front steps. A small brown package. No shipping label. No return address. Owen noticed it first. Were you expecting something? No. My heartbeat quickened. Slowly, I picked it up and carried it upstairs. The package was surprisingly light. Inside, wrapped in plain tissue paper, was a brand new pair of gardening gloves. Professional grade. Durable. Expensive. The kind I would never buy for myself. Beneath them sat another handwritten card. This one contained only a single sentence. Some people spend so much time protecting others that they forget to protect themselves. I knew exactly who had sent it. The frustrating part was that I could not decide whether I was annoyed or touched. Maybe both. My phone vibrated before I could think about it further. Another message. This time there was no unknown number. Somehow Callum had decided secrecy was no longer necessary. I hope you got home safely. I stared at the screen, then at the gloves, then back at the screen. For several seconds I debated ignoring him. Instead, I typed 5 words I never expected to send. Thank you for the flowers. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then a reply. You are welcome. A second message followed before I could answer. Marin, has anyone been making you feel unsafe? My smile disappeared instantly. My thumb hovered over the screen while my heart pounded harder than it should have. Has anyone been making you feel unsafe? The question sat there, glowing beneath the soft kitchen light, refusing to disappear. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted the conversation and gone to bed. Instead, I found myself staring at those words as if they held an answer to something I had been avoiding for years. Across the room, Owen was finishing homework at the kitchen table. His pencil scratched against paper. The refrigerator hummed quietly. Everything looked normal. Ordinary. Safe. Yet I could not shake the feeling that something was changing beneath the surface of my life. I typed 3 different responses before deleting all of them. Finally, I settled on the simplest one. Why are you asking? The reply came almost immediately. Because you look over your shoulder too often. My chest tightened. I hated how observant he was. Another message appeared. Because you wear long sleeves when it is nearly 90 degrees outside. Then another. Because every time someone asks how you are doing, you answer too quickly. I set the phone face down on the table. For several seconds I simply stared at the wall. No one was supposed to notice those things. People were supposed to accept the version of me I presented. The capable version. The smiling version. The version that always had everything under control. You look like someone just gave you terrible news, Owen said. I glanced up. Nothing happened. He pointed his pencil at me. That answer is becoming suspicious. Despite everything, I laughed. Felt strange. Lighter than I expected. Owen smiled in satisfaction before returning to his assignment. A few minutes later my phone vibrated again. Against my better judgment I picked it up. There was only one new message. You do not have to tell me anything. Relief washed through me. Then I read the next sentence. But you should tell someone. The warmth disappeared just as quickly. Because that was the problem, was it not? Telling someone made things real. Admitting fear gave it shape. Admitting exhaustion made it harder to pretend I could handle everything alone. I carried my phone to the window and looked down at the dark street below. Rockhaven slept peacefully beneath pools of yellow streetlight. Somewhere in the distance a ship horn echoed. Across the harbor. Familiar. Comforting. Yet tonight the town felt different somehow. Smaller. Like secrets had less room to hide. My phone vibrated once more. This time it was not Callum. It was a local bank notification. I opened it automatically, then froze. A payment had posted to the flower shop account. My stomach dropped. The amount was large enough to cover 3 months of supplier costs. There had to be a mistake. I checked again. The number remained exactly the same. My pulse quickened. Attached to the transaction was a reference note. Anonymous Community Business Grant. I stared at it in disbelief. We had applied for dozens of grants over the years. None had ever gone through. Yet somehow this one had appeared less than 24 hours after meeting Callum Voss. Coincidence? It had to be a coincidence. Except deep down I already knew it was not. And when my phone lit up one final time displaying a simple message from him that read, "Did something good happen tonight?" I realized he already knew too. My first reaction was anger. Not gratitude. Not relief. Anger. I stared at the message while heat rose into my face. Did something good happen tonight? The question felt almost absurd. Whoever had arranged that grant knew exactly what had happened. They knew because they had made it happen. I typed a response immediately. Did you do this? The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally a reply arrived. The grant committee made its own decision. I laughed once. A short sound without any humor in it. That was not an answer. I looked around the apartment. Owen was asleep. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the floor. The photograph of my mother still rested on the table beside the gardening gloves. Everything suddenly felt connected in a way that made me uncomfortable. The flowers. The messages. The concern. The grant. Piece by piece, Callum Voss had inserted himself into my life. And the worst part was that a small part of me was grateful. I hated that feeling. The next morning I woke up determined to reclaim some control. The sky was clear. The harbor sparkled beneath bright sunlight. By 8 o'clock the flower shop was open and busy. Customers came and went. Orders needed filling. Deliveries needed checking. Real life demanded attention. That was exactly what I needed. Around noon, I walked 3 blocks to the bank carrying paperwork for the business account. I wanted answers. The branch manager greeted me with a smile and reviewed the grant documentation. Everything was legitimate. Everything was properly filed. Every signature was in place. By the time she finished explaining, I felt more frustrated than before. There was nothing to challenge. Nothing to reject. Whoever had helped had done it through completely legal channels. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, my phone vibrated. A message from Callum. Lunch. I stopped walking. The audacity of that single word almost made me laugh. After everything, he wanted lunch. I should have ignored it. Instead, I typed back. Why? His reply came seconds later. Because you are angry. I stared at the screen. Another message followed. And because angry people should not make important financial decisions. Against my will, a smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. He was impossible. I hated how easily he seemed to read me. 30 minutes later I found myself standing outside a small waterfront cafe near the marina. The kind of place fishermen visited before dawn and families visited on weekends. Not expensive. Not exclusive. Ordinary. Somehow that surprised me. Callum was already there, seated at a table overlooking the water. He stood when I approached. The gesture was simple, respectful, unexpected. You are interfering in my life, I said before even sitting down. Not hello. Not thank you. Straight to the point. To his credit, he did not seem offended. That is one interpretation. It is the correct interpretation. He studied me for a moment before nodding. Fair enough. The honesty caught me off guard. I sat down slowly. Harbor gulls drifted overhead. Boats rocked gently against the docks. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then Callum folded his hands on the table and looked directly at me. Marin, do you want to know why I cannot stop worrying about you? For the first time since meeting him, I was not sure I wanted the answer. The harbor breeze carried the scent of salt water and fresh coffee between us. Boats drifted lazily behind the cafe. People laughed somewhere along the marina. It should have felt like an ordinary afternoon. Instead, every nerve in my body seemed focused on the man sitting across from me. Callum held my gaze for several seconds before speaking again. The honest answer, he asked. I nodded once. Because you remind me of someone I failed. The words landed quietly. No drama. No attempt to impress me. Just truth. He looked out toward the water before continuing. For a long time I believed strength meant handling everything alone. I respected people who never complained. People who never asked for help. His expression hardened slightly. Then I learned that silence can hide a lot of pain. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup. The warmth grounded me. You think that is what I am doing? He did not answer immediately. I think you have become so used to carrying responsibility that you no longer notice how heavy it is. The frustrating part was that I could not dismiss him. Because somewhere deep down I knew he was right. We sat there for nearly an hour. Not discussing secrets. Not discussing the marks he had noticed. Instead we talked about ordinary things. The flower shop. Owen's plans after graduation. His shipping company. Rockhaven. The strange thing was how normal it felt. The more we talked, the less he seemed like the intimidating figure everyone whispered about. He listened carefully. He remembered details. He asked questions because he genuinely wanted answers. It was dangerous in an entirely different way. By the time lunch ended, I found myself smiling more than I had in months. That realization followed me all the way back to the flower shop. The afternoon passed quickly. Customers came and went. Deliveries arrived. Life moved forward. Around 6 o'clock, I stepped outside to lock up. The sky glowed orange above the harbor. For the first time in a long while, the future felt slightly less overwhelming. Then I noticed something waiting near the door. A small white envelope. No stamp. No address. My stomach tightened immediately. Slowly I picked it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. There was only one sentence written across the center. Some people are not happy that you have new friends. Every trace of warmth vanished from my chest. I read the sentence twice. 3 times. My pulse accelerated with each repetition. This was different from the flowers. Different from the messages. Different from the grant. The note felt wrong. Cold. Deliberate. Behind me, the bell above the flower shop door jingled as Owen stepped outside carrying a trash bag. What is that? He asked. I folded the paper instantly. Nothing. The lie came automatically. But as I looked toward the harbor, a familiar feeling settled over me. The feeling of being watched. Not by Callum. Not by someone concerned. By someone who wanted me to know they were paying attention. And for the first time since all of this began, I realized the changes happening in my life might not be affecting only me. They might be drawing attention from people neither of us had expected. That night I did something I had not done in years. I told the truth. Not all of it. Not the parts one still could not say out loud. But enough. Owen was sitting on the couch when I finally unfolded the note again. He read it once and immediately looked up. That is not normal. I know. The words felt heavier than they should have. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. You should tell Callum. I laughed softly. Since when are you on a first-name basis with him? Since he apparently knows everything before everyone else. I wanted to argue. Instead I found myself staring at the note. Maybe Owen was right. Maybe carrying everything alone had become a habit instead of a strength. Later that evening I sent Callum a photograph of the message. No explanation. No dramatic text. Just the image. My phone rang less than 30 seconds later. I answered immediately. That was fast. Where are you? His voice was calm, but something beneath it felt sharp. Focused. At home. Silence. Then a slow exhale. Good. I walked to the apartment window and looked out at the harbor lights. I can handle this. The words sounded weaker than they once had. I know you can, he said. The answer caught me off guard. Then why do you sound worried? Another brief silence followed. Because handling everything alone comes with a cost. I closed my eyes. Somewhere below, a car passed along the street. The world kept moving. Yet something inside me felt still. You know what the strange part is? I asked quietly. What? A few weeks ago I would have ignored something like this. My fingers tightened around the phone. I would have convinced myself it did not matter. And now, I looked toward the flower shop across the street. Toward the life I had spent years protecting. Toward the future I was finally allowing myself to imagine. Now I think it does matter. Callum did not respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I had ever heard it. That is not weakness, Marin. My throat tightened unexpectedly. No. No. The harbor lights reflected against the glass as I smiled despite myself. For the first time in years, I was not standing alone against every problem. Not because someone had rescued me. Not because someone had solved my life. But because I had finally allowed another person to stand beside me. A year later, the flower shop was still there. So was I. White carnations filled the front display window. Owen was preparing for college. The bills were paid. The future no longer felt like something to survive. Felt like something to build. Sometimes customers asked why I always kept a single white carnation near the register. I would smile and tell them it was a reminder. A reminder that resilience does not mean carrying every burden alone. A reminder that healing often begins the moment someone finally sees what you have been trying so hard to hide. And whenever I looked toward the harbor and saw a familiar figure standing near the water, I remembered something my mother once told me. The strongest flowers are not the ones that never face storms. They are the ones that keep blooming after the storm has passed. If this story stayed with you, let us know in the comments what part touched your heart the most. And if you enjoy emotional stories about love, resilience, and second chances, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We would love to see you in the next story.